Hello and welcome to Print Tech, the Print's technology show. Your phone camera has evolved to the point where you have stopped missing the original point and shoot cameras, the conventional ones, and in some cases, even the DSLRs. Now, the game is set to be taken a notch higher. Phone makers and manufacturers are partnering with legacy camera makers to take the game higher. To talk about that and much more, and what's happening in the phone camera landscape, we are joined by Sahil Mohan Gupta, the Print's technology expert. Welcome, Sahil. Welcome to the Print.
Thanks a lot.
So, what's happening? What's new happening? Which are the devices which are now making the buzz vis-a-vis partnership with legacy camera makers?
I mean, we have a lot of camera phones out here. Yeah. We have in March already. A lot of phones have been launched. Only last week, the Xiaomi 13 Pro was announced, and this comes with a triple 50 megapixel camera system. But what's unique here is the lens. It's a co-engineered product with Leica, the German icon.
Right.
You know, like Leica cameras used by street photographers the world over. The American photography giant Stephen McCurry, he's known to use a lot of Leica hardware, and in fact he says this is the best camera phone in the market right now in terms of still photography. So a lot of stuff is happening. Then we have the new Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. I've written a column about this. While Samsung hasn't really partnered with any camera manufacturer out here, but Samsung is a giant on its own. They make their own image sensors, so they've got an entire end-to-end pipeline.
Well, good that you brought up Samsung, and a little bit of understanding that I have about phones and cameras, and I was reading it somewhere, and I found that broadly there are two categories of manufacturers. On one side, when it comes to camera and partnership with legacy camera makers, there is Samsung, Apple, and Google, who do not tend to get into any sort of direct partnership with legacy camera makers. And then you have the OnePlus, then you have Xiaomi. So why do you think this difference? Because I mean, iPhone cameras are also great. So why is it that other manufacturers need to get into a partnership with camera makers?
So there are two pieces out here. One is the brand itself, and the other piece is the technology piece. Apple, Samsung, Google on their own are iconic brands. They're probably bigger brands than these legacy camera manufacturers. They are. Right. Bigger brands. So from a marketing and branding perspective, the belief out there is that, like, you will definitely often hear when an Apple keynote happens, Apple design lens, Apple design silicon, it's Apple silicon, Apple camera, everything is Apple. Right. Like when Apple acquired Beats, that was the foundation of Apple Music. And they had the Beats One radio, and now it's turned into Apple One radio. Right. So anything they acquire or partner with, it gets swallowed into their brand, because they are the big 800-pound gorilla out there. And that remains true for Google, Samsung as well. Then the other piece is the technology. These companies have tremendous amounts of resources. So there's a lot of in-house technology that's being developed. And while there are some partnerships that are in the back end, there are more B2B deals. Like, for example, this iPhone 14 Pro Max has a Sony sensor. Right. The main sensor is a Sony one. On the new Pixel 7 Pro, it's again a Sony sensor. On the Samsung one, well, Samsung is like one of the biggest consumer electronics and technology companies. So they make everything. They make the memory, they make processors, they make RAM, right. They make camera sensors. They do everything in-house. It's such a vertically integrated business on such a high level that they create their own stuff, and the best stuff is always reserved for their best phones.
So in a way, it would be wrong to say that the other phone manufacturers likes of Xiaomi and OnePlus, they are in a way compared to these big brands a notch lower when it comes to camera technology, and hence they require some level of partnership.
Yes and no. Definitely, as brands, they are definitely lower, so they need that push. They need that.
The additional heft.
Yeah, like they have to make their product feel iconic. That's why this phone comes with a Leica camera, because like when you think of Leica, that's an iconic brand in terms of photography. When you look at the OnePlus 11, you think of Hasselblad out here. They're partnered with Hasselblad. The partnership has been there for like 2 years now. And Hasselblad was the company that made the camera that took the original moonshot. Neil Armstrong stepping on the moon.
Well, I think that's something that these companies are looking for. Maybe some sense of association with history, legacy, entry into or maybe a touch to the hallowed part of a certain brand. But what exactly is the technological difference that these partnerships bring to these devices?
Now,
if we can compare these new ones which have been built in partnership with camera companies to some of the previous generation phones which were usually independently manufactured by the phone makers.
So we have had these camera partnerships for a very long time. Even back in the day, before the iPhone existed, you had the Nokia phones with Carl Zeiss lenses. Sony Ericsson phones used to have Carl Zeiss optics and all of that. And now these days, Carl Zeiss is partnered with Vivo. And there's going to be a phone that's going to be launching later next month or maybe later this month called the X90 Pro, which will have Carl Zeiss optics. What has been happening of late since probably 2016 is these partnerships have been initially marketing partnerships, and then they have evolved into technological partnerships. Progressively, they have gotten more immersive, and then the camera manufacturer, the Leicas, the Hasselblads, the Zeisses of this world, they've had a greater influence on the camera system developed by the likes of Vivo, OnePlus, Oppo, Xiaomi. In fact, before Xiaomi, this partnership with Xiaomi that Leica did only happened last year. Before that, they were tied to Huawei.
Right.
And Huawei's cameras got great benefit since 2016. Remember, there was the Huawei P9, then P10, P20, P30, P40.
Then it would be safe to say that a phone manufacturer like Huawei did actually benefit from this partnership.
I mean, till the US trade restrictions happened because what Donald Trump did, Huawei for a short period also became the #1 manufacturer by sales in the smartphone segment. So they were doing great, and the photography element was people wanted the Huawei, particularly in the European market. China and Europe markets were dominated by Huawei.
Right.
And that obviously went away for different reasons. And now Leica has come back with Xiaomi, because Xiaomi is big in India, is pretty big in Europe as well. Right. So they are probably hoping on replicating that same magical effect.
But Sahil, that's for the phone manufacturer. What's in there for these legacy camera companies which are losing market? Can we say that they are losing market? They have lost a huge market, especially the point and shoot ones. Yeah. They are nowhere to be seen. Phones are something that people are preferring over them. Yeah. So what is in it for them?
I mean, that you kind of answered the question yourself out there. These brands are kind of irrelevant to the average consumer today. I mean, a Leica camera does not start before, I feel, $2,000 to $3,000. And that's like a bare minimum rangefinder camera that's like very specific use. It doesn't have a huge play in video. It's mostly used by street photographers. Right. So it's a very specific use camera. It's
I mean, what I wanted to know is that aren't these companies threatened by the rise of phone cameras?
They are. They are absolutely.
Or have they come out with a new segmented approach to their market, to their sales, that they'll be they would not be focusing on point and shoot ones and probably leave it for the phone manufacturers to eat up the market, and then keep the core technology for their higher end products like the DSLRs.
In a way, you could say they have already relinquished the point and shoot camera, and this has basically become a point and shoot camera.
Absolutely.
If you look at this Xiaomi phone, it has a 1-inch sensor out here, which is the same size sensor that you see on a Sony RX100 point and shoot camera, same size.
Right.
So now it gets Leica optics, so in a way it could be potentially better than that that camera, and then you get the Qualcomm chip, so you get all the benefits of computational photography. They can actually do more on the phone, and at the same time, this phone starts at 80,000 rupees, which is like much cheaper than a Leica camera that you would ideally buy, like the entry level.
Right.
Leica.
That's also something that interests, and that's something that will interest all our viewers. The pricing part. Does the addition of a brand to a smartphone, of a camera brand to a smartphone, does it also translate into higher pricing? Or is it just brand building?
Yes, on some level it will, because there would be some licensing of the brand. So there would be a licensing fee that the smartphone maker is paying to the iconic camera manufacturer. And then there would be engineering elements, like for example, Xiaomi says in the case of this phone, the 8-element lens is fully designed and manufactured by Leica. They don't say if it's manufactured by Leica in Germany. It could also even happen in China itself, but that lens technology they don't have. And similarly, on the OnePlus, a lot of camera tuning, the software is designed, the camera app itself is designed by Hasselblad, so that is happening. On the Vivo phones, that partnership, because it's a little older partnership, that partnership has existed since 2021. It goes even a few steps beyond that. So,
and what kind of challenges do manufacturers face when trying to incorporate a legacy camera technology into a small pocket-sized device like a phone?
I mean, it's not a challenge, because they are not actually adopting the same technology. They are adopting the principles of their camera hardware,
Okay.
but in a phone context, in a digital small camera context. So they simulate a lot of things, like you have portrait mode, so you'll have some Leica black and white monochrome modes. There's a 90mm bokeh mode, which kind of mimics the way certain Leica cameras produce portrait shots. So that's there for even the Zeiss partnership on Vivo. Similarly, on Hasselblad, also on the OnePlus 11, they say that they do the Hasselblad portrait mode. So that is a big piece of it.
So do you think that that actually
They simulate it.
Going specifically into OnePlus, the technology that they are trying to project, does that have merit?
There is some merit, because now it's reached a point where unless you have got a trained eye,
Because these things will eventually become, for this brand and for other brands as well, it will become sort of a selling point.
yeah.
So they have to have some level of delivery. Is it there? in
Yes,
these phones?
like particularly on the OnePlus 11, this phone starts at around 56,000 rupees, and out of all the new flagship phones that have launched this year, this one is not only the cheapest, it's the best value for money, because it is giving you a great camera regardless. Sure, it may not be as good as this Leica powered Xiaomi or the Galaxy S23 Ultra, but it is going to be good enough for most people.
But then maybe a direct comparison for our viewers, because 56,000 rupees is a sum. For a lot of people, they might be able to get an iPhone also.
No, they can't. Not the latest one.
Of course, not the latest.
Yeah.
Of course, not the latest one. Maybe a generation before, maybe 13 or 12. 13, I think, is something that fits into this
I
project.
would say probably if you compare it to the 13, the camera on some level is on par, if not slightly better. And overall, as a package, this phone leaps ahead.
So you are saying that for 56,000, it in a way
It's value for money.
a value for money.
Yeah.
Well, and what else? What other brands? What other phones are going to be launched in near future, which will see such partnerships? And how do all of them try to differentiate each other?
I mean, they're going to
Because if it becomes a norm, then individual manufacturers will have to then again find ways to differentiate and project their brand in a different way.
like for example, Sony is the brand that makes all the camera sensors. Like out of all the phones that we have here, only this Samsung phone doesn't have a Sony sensor, and even the Pixel 7 has a Sony sensor. So Sony doesn't sell phones in India anymore, but in Japan and the US they have got certain models. So they use their own sensors and they tune it in a different way. So that's a very unique proposition. That phone is actually geared towards people who want to shoot video. So that's a very different, unique proposition. I mean, there are only n number of iconic brands out there. Like for example, Kodak as a brand, they have pretty much moved out of photography and they are like lending their brand to televisions. We had covered Avneet Singh Marwa of SPPL, and
Right.
they are the licensee for the Kodak brand, and that brand is moved into television. So like all of these legacy brands in the camera category, they are trying to revive themselves by, I mean, Kodak has taken a very unique approach, but on some level they want to be relevant in the current consumer electronics continuum.
Right. Well, we can say it's in a way it's a win-win situation for both sides, phone manufacturers and the legacy camera companies. Sahil also writes a weekly column for us under the same name, Print Tech. Sahil, what are we going to read next and for over a few weeks to come? If you could tell our viewers in advance.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. We've just finished Mobile World Congress, which happened in Barcelona last week. So I'm going to be writing a lot of stuff about launches there. And Intel has launched a series of new processors. So I'm going to be covering some new laptops as well. And generally, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming in the pipeline. And I will also be writing stuff that is not just gadgety stuff.
Right. A lot of stuff coming in then for all of you. Well, we leave it at that and in this episode of Print Tech. Thank you for watching. Thanks, Sahil.
Sure.